Hi, I'm Dr. Padilla. I am a professor in computer science and psychology, and I've been a faculty member for over 5 years. I've been doing a little mini series on advice for applying to graduate school, and today I wanted to talk about an exciting topic, and this is how to ace your PhD interviews. Ideally, you've made it through the whole process, and now you're starting to get calls to interview at different labs with different professors. So today I'm going to give you the top 5 ways to ace your PhD interview. Now, before I get started, I wanted to talk about the different types of interviews that you will encounter. There's sort of 3 categories. One is an informal meeting where you're really just having a 10 to 30 minute discussion with a potential advisor that is a little less scripted, and it's more of a kind of a getting to know you to see if you would be a good fit. That often happens in response to an email that you send out inquiring if you would in fact be a good fit. And this might be even before you submit your application. So that's one type, a very informal, just sort of meeting. The next one is a formal interview that happens online. And this is usually scheduled for 30 to 45 minutes. And the person or people interviewing you will have a script that they have to follow. And part of what is happening here is all of the different candidates who have made it to that stage are being asked the same questions. So they will kind of have this formal set of questions that they ask you in a particular order, and they will have a limited time to ask you those questions. Now, the third category is an in-person interview, and this is where they fly you out for an interview along with all of the other people who are interviewing. So there's a day that they have and they bring everyone out, and you will meet everyone in your potential cohort and the people you are competing against. It's a great opportunity to have some one-on-one time with your advisor, to meet the other people in the lab, to meet the people in the cohort, and also to see the campus. And when they fly you out, they generally pay for that and cover your expenses. You might have to get reimbursed, but generally that is on the university. So those are the 3 categories of interviews you might be asked to do. And I want to say that in all of those, no matter how formal or informal, you are always being evaluated. So don't think that just because, the person that you're interviewing with is being very casual, that it is not high stakes. When you're trying to get into a PhD program, the smartest, most prolific people are applying as well, and they're your competition. So use every single opportunity to set your best foot forward. So that's to say, even if it's one of those informal interviews, still take it very seriously and prepare. So that brings me to the top 5 tips I have for acing your PhD interview. The first one is why I'm actually dressed up like this, and it is to look professional. This is the type of outfit I would wear really for any of those levels of interviews. I might go a little bit overboard, but I do like to indicate that I'm taking something very seriously. And I know as an undergrad, you might be inclined to hang out in sweats and t-shirts, and you will probably do that in the lab. But by presenting yourself in a professional manner, you are indicating that you're taking the process very seriously. Do you have to get dressed up in a suit and tie? No, not necessarily. But if you feel comfortable in that, absolutely go for it. It really does stand out when, everyone else is just in a button-up shirt and someone comes in with a tie. It shows that they really care and they're trying. So it will never hurt you to dress as professionally as you feel comfortable in. So I say go for it as professional as you'd like to be. This is probably what I would wear. But note that this is not what I would be interviewing someone in. I would be much more casual when I'm interviewing someone, but I would really respect if they showed up in a very professional manner. In terms of looking professional, not just dressing yourself, but looking professional on a Zoom interview, that is something that I find students have difficulty with for some reason. Let me give you an example. Hi, I'm Dr. Padilla. I'm happy to be in this interview. Right? This is not great. And I think, if you've spent a lot of time on TikTok, you are cool with being this close. But for interviews, it's truly, truly not ideal. So you really have to think about framing yourself in the interview window. All right, this is actually what I would be wearing to interview someone. So don't think that if someone's dressing down, then you should be dressing down too. Be as professional as you feel comfortable being, and it will definitely be respected. That brings me to my second tip for acing your PhD interview, and that is to practice your opening statement. Almost every interview you do, there will be some type of question that they start with that is framed as, please tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, the way to do that correctly, or in a good way, is to use a little bit of a formula. One is to introduce yourself, say, who you are and where you're coming from. Then talk very briefly about relevant prior experience. I'm talking a minute, maybe 2 minutes max. And then talk about what you're excited for in your PhD. Something you're excited to study, topics you're excited to pursue. So it's kind of a 3-element component. Introduction, who you are, where you came from. That can be as simple as, hello, I'm Dr. Padilla. I am an undergrad at X university. I've worked in this particular lab with this particular professor. I have research experience working on a few projects related to AI and decision making, and we've published a few papers in that space. I am excited to be applying to work with you because I'm looking forward to expanding my skills in this area and to take these particular classes to learn this new area of expertise. That's it. That was under a minute, basically. So fill in those types of elements for yourself. Practice that over and over and over again so you can say it with confidence. And it could come very easily for you. What you don't want to do with that opening statement is give a chronological order of all of the things that you've done thus far. They're not looking for an exhaustive list. They have your CV. They're simply beginning the conversation and really just getting to know you a little bit. So keep it short and sweet, but practice it so you can say it with confidence. My third tip, which is kind of silly to be a tip, but it is to be prepared. And the way you're prepared for PhD interviews is that you know something about the type of research that the person you're speaking with does. So my recommendation for this is to go on Google Scholar and look up the person's most cited paper and read that, and then read a few of their most recently published papers, the ones that are most exciting to you. And you want to know in detail what those papers are about. You can even take notes as you read them to remember the key elements of those papers. And what will happen is, as you're developing this conversation, you can start to indicate or reference back those papers that you read for interesting topics. The professor might be talking about this element that they're interested in researching, and you can say, oh, that's like this thing that you've studied in this paper. Are you interested in expanding it in this way? So you're illustrating that you have a command of the work that they're doing. That is how you prepare for these PhD interviews. You're wanting to show that you are ready and committed to being a contributing member of their lab. Along with preparing by reading the papers is writing down a few specific questions you have about those papers. It might be about a method they're using or a topic that you find exciting, or maybe some questions that you have. Write those down so you can easily pull them out when you're in conversations, so they know that you've read it in enough detail to have thoughtful questions about the papers. That is how you prepare for your PhD interviews. For acing your PhD interviews is to practice standardized questions. There's the same questions that you get asked over and over and over again, so just practice them. Practice them as many times as you can. They tend to be fairly straightforward. One is, tell me about your technical skills. What they're looking for is some of the ways that you've implemented some of the technical aspects of the field that you're going into. So you'll want to think about the technical element that you want to talk about and give a brief example of utilizing that in some meaningful way. So rather than just, listing off all of the programming languages you know how to use, you could say, well, I know this programming language and I've implemented it in this really interesting project, or I had the ability to expand my expertise in this software architecture framework that I was able to utilize in this particular project. So that is a really a way to show that you don't just know the names of these programs, but you've actually used them in a meaningful way. Along those lines, they will ask you to talk about maybe your technical writing skills. Again, a good way to answer those questions are to list off what you've done and examples of how you've utilized those skills and abilities. So keep those in your pocket and practice those answers to those questions over and over again. Another question that you will get asked in almost all of the interviews, and this is probably the most important question of the interview, is tell me about an idea or a project you would like to do in the first few years. What you need to do to prepare for that is to write out a research idea. And what is happening here is the advisor is looking to see if you are ready. Do you have ideas? Do you have thoughts? Do you have ways that you want to expand the current research of the lab? Because that's what they're looking for. That is an indication that someone is prepared and they're ready. So what you can do is take a look at some of the current ongoing work that is going on in the lab and think about an extension of one of those projects. So for example, go on Google Scholar, sort by year, look at the most recent paper, and think about a simple way to expand some of the newest stuff that they're doing. And an addition to that, it's a very simple way to say, I don't have everything figured out in terms of what I want to do for my entire PhD, but I'd love to expand this method that you've been working on currently, or I'm really excited about this research trajectory that your lab is doing. I'd love to advance it in this way or do it a continuation, okay? But you want something specific. Don't just hand wave and say like, oh, I'd love to study, trust in AI. Instead, you want to say, I'd love to put together an experiment that examines trust in AI in this way, with these methods, with this population, and showing that specificity illustrates that you're ready. And it's very hard to do that on the fly. So you want to write it down. Write down some very specific ideas you have for things you could do in your first few years. And that will become very, very handy. And then the last major question you'll get probably from every interview is, so why do you want to join this university or this lab, or why do you want to work with me? You need to practice that question again and again and have your candid answer for why do you want to work with that professor? And that can be very uncomfortable because they might say, so tell me, why do you want to work with me? When someone says that to you, it can feel like a little strange. But if you practice that answer, it can come more fluidly. And it can be as simple as saying, I think that you are a premier researcher and X in the field, and I'm very excited to pursue a career in this industry, and I would be honored to work with you. And I think I can bring this element to your research lab, and I think I could gain these elements of expertise. So together we could really advance your research mission. Something to that degree. Okay, my fourth topic to help you ace your PhD interview is to have your own list of questions ready. Go ahead and write those down as well. You will find lists online of questions that students ask, so I can tell if a student has looked at those lists because they all ask the same questions. I think a more interesting strategy is to ask advisors about the work that they're excited about. So a really good question is, can you tell me about a project that you are very excited about right now? Or what is the newest type of project that your lab is pursuing? In part because you won't be able to tell from their online presence what they're most excited about or the new work that hasn't been published yet. So that is a really cool opportunity for you to get to see some of the more exciting stuff that's going on. And then that will get the professor talking about things that they enjoy. And that's really the mind frame you want them to be in, is to have these positive feelings when they're talking to you. So write down a list of specific questions that you have 3, if not more. They will leave about 10 minutes at the end of every interview for you to ask questions, and they might be very efficient with asking them. So it's nice to have more questions rather than less questions. My 5th tip for acing your PhD interview is to be very thankful and thank the interviewer once they're done, and to follow up with a thank you email that includes some of the details that you've discussed. It shows that you thought deeply about the discussion, that it made an impact on you. For example, you can write an email that said, "Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I found it very exciting to learn about this thing X that you talked about in the interview. If you have any additional papers that you think are relevant for that topic, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions you might have about my application." Something like that. that really indicates that you thought deeply about the discussion and you're excited to continue the conversation. Those are my 5 major tips. I also wanted to talk about some things to not do that I've seen tank some people's PhD interviews. The number one thing is to not overshare, which can be very hard because you want to create this nice relationship with your PhD advisor, of course. But you should think of it more as applying to a job where you need to be professional and present yourself professionally. It is not necessarily a situation where you're going to be best friends with your advisor, nor do you want that to be the case, frankly. So just keep the personal information as much to yourself as you would in a very professional setting. The next don't on my list, don't let loose at the after parties. So oftentimes when there's in-person interviews, there's these after parties with just the graduate students where you get to know who will be in your cohort and get to know the current graduate students more. Those can be very fun experiences and they may feel very informal because you're connecting with more of your peers. Do not fully let loose at those parties. Conduct yourself in a professional manner. You are still being evaluated during this time period. So the advisors will ask the PhD students if anything happened during those situations that made them uncomfortable, and they will ask, based on those interpersonal experiences, who they think would be a good fit for the lab. So just keep in mind that you are always being evaluated, even in those seemingly informal situations, and to conduct yourself appropriately, even if there's a party-like atmosphere happening. Along the same lines, when you're having these more informal events, you will be doing that potentially with people that you are competing against. You will be having dinner or drinks potentially with other people that you're competing against. So don't be too competitive in the sense where you're trying to outdo other individuals. That can often look bad on a person that is not treating other people kindly. That often gets back to the people that you're interviewing with. And that goes for everyone. Treat every single person that you engage with in an interview that is either part of the interview or not with kindness and respect. And that goes for the people who are organizing the interview, the staff folks who are helping to arrange different events. All of those people, their opinions actually matter to some degree to the advisor. So treat everyone with respect and kindness, and don't feel like you need to kind of outcompete people. Be the best version of yourself, and that will come through quite nicely in the interview. And the last thing to maybe avoid when you're interviewing is talking at great length about the other places that you are interviewing. That can kind of come out in discussions, but you want the people that you're interviewing with to think that they are your top choice. They may or may not be, but you need to get that offer, right? To be able to compare the different offers. So you want that offer and you want them to think that that you're very excited to be working with them. So I've seen some people tank their interviews by simply being dismissive of the place that they're interviewing at because they have other places in mind that are top for them. If you have any other suggestions for types of content you would like to see, also please comment that. And if you like this video, I would very much appreciate you to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content on academic success. Take care.